Hello and welcome to this edition of Secure Networks, the Endace Packet Forensic Files with your host, Michael Morris. This week's special guest is Scott Register, VP of Security Solutions for Keysight Technologies. Scott, first of all, thank you for joining. Welcome.
It's my pleasure.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Good to see you virtually again, since
Yes.
obviously we won't be bumping in each other like at trade shows or anything
Nope.
anytime soon. That doesn't seem to be in the offing. So I run the Security Solutions Group here at Keysight, and we're focused on a pretty broad spectrum of security applications, right? We do everything from 5G to automotive to IoT and especially OT devices. And of course, we have through Breaking Point and Ixia, which is where I came from, we've got a really strong background in things like network security testing, right? Whether it's service provider networks or we're used by basically every security manufacturer, when they're developing and testing products for their release. So basically, I manage that team and help to bring new products to market and in the security field, sort of writ large across that.
Scott, that background is exactly why I was hoping to get some of your insights for our listeners. Obviously, with the pandemic, you and I both here on video conferencing, not getting out of our home offices. Massive changes going on in IT security space with the major shift to remote workers. What are you seeing as some of the biggest challenges organizations are facing, and what are you seeing them do to solve it?
Well, there's certainly in the sort of rush to remote, that presented a lot of sudden challenges for IT departments and like SecOps teams that they weren't necessarily prepared for, right? Like almost everyone had some remote access capability. Not everyone, but almost every organization had that. But maybe it was for 5 or 10% of employees, right? And suddenly you've got 100% of people, and that's a huge difference, right? One of my favorite pictures that I like to share. I have a very good friend who's a bond trader, right? And so he normally works on a trading floor, right? They didn't have remote access set up. I mean, they might have had some like small token thing, but every day they come into a trading floor and trading starts at whatever it is, like 8 a.m. and then it runs till 5, and then everybody goes home, right? I mean, he didn't have a laptop. No one in the group had any kind of remote capability. And now he's got this like crazy setup, the 32-inch monitors and the Bloomberg terminal, keyboard, all that stuff that they're having to support, right? So they've got to support so they're supporting like bond trading and video conferencing and all this stuff for this huge group of people. And so think about the security, right? I mean, there's huge security implications, right? If if someone can see, get insight into financial transactions before they hit, like that's a big deal. And so you've got to support all of those security requirements. But at the same time, they've got latency concerns, they're doing video conferencing, they're doing all that. And so those IT teams, who I'm sure are quite capable, they're suddenly having to confront this new set of challenges, right? How do you give, dramatically, massively upscale that remote access capability with really high performance, really low latency, and still be very, very secure, right? And there's all these, all sorts of trade-offs that you have to consider there. And so, we've certainly seen, I mean, that's sort of an extreme example, but we've seen lots of cases where our customers, they were suddenly confronted with this challenge, and there's lots of stuff that kind of goes along with that. So just in the last few months, that's one of the biggest sort of single things that we've seen, coupled of course with the fact that there's nobody in your data center or wherever often to go make physical changes, right? And so you're having to do all this stuff sort of remotely, and it's certainly a very different world, right?
Well, and you have a unique perspective of it with your guys' business, right? Because Keysight's providing solutions both in the development and testing side, as well as on the monitoring side. What are you seeing common or different between those segments across the industry?
Well, so obviously the testing, the thought of really serious large scale remote access kind of scalability testing as well as security testing. I mean, that's a big change. I mean, people sort of knew of the concept, but I mean, there were a lot of people who frankly said, "Oh, I expect about whatever it is, 50 remote users, and so I'll buy the 50 user VPN license on my firewall, and I'm fine, and like problem solved, and that's it." And now, let's just think about the capacity part, right? We actually offer a service now because we've been doing SSL testing since, gosh, 2010 at least, right? I mean, so we've been, that's been part of our business. And traditionally we were doing it sort of off of hardware platforms, right? And typically used by equipment manufacturers. Now, so now we have a cloud-based service where you can just kind of sign up, and we can do remote access testing. So if you've got any popular remote access gateway, Cisco or PAN or whoever, Juniper, we can do scalability testing and latency testing with sort of cloud-based clients and let okay, in real life, how many users can you support? What's the sign-on latency? What's the latency? Can you support voice over IP calls, right? With reasonable performance, things like that. So, and that had just never occurred to people in the past. So like that's one of the big things on the performance side of testing. On the security side, there are a lot of, certainly like the bad guys are trying to take advantage of kind of what's going on, right? And we've seen a lot of kind of COVID specific attacks that, and like for example, there are kind of two categories. One is like information, right? If you want an employee to open an email, a good spoofed email that you can send, you send out an email that looks like it's from HR, it's from someone, it's important COVID update for employees, something like that, right? People are going to open that, right? They just are, and so that's kind of a convenient cover. We've also seen a lot of people, kind of bad actors, taking advantage of weaker IoT devices, right? I mean, not to pick on like Belkin, but just for example, like Belkin smart plugs. I mean, there's kind of a well-known like exploit with that, but a lot of people have those and similar devices in their house. And so now you've got all these remote users at home on networks where maybe they have like, their kids, you've got teenagers who are playing games and doing like God knows what, who knows what's on like their laptops, right? And then you've got these IoT devices, whether it's smart plugs, televisions, whatever it is. And now, like, since we've all talked about, the perimeter is going away and has gone away, but now your perimeter really is like full time in people's homes, right? And so you're on the same Wi-Fi network or whatever as all these devices. And then, so if you're on the SecOps side, you've got decisions to make. Like, well, I've got this great security gateway, right, from whoever it is, right? PAN, Checkpoint, Fortinet. There's lots of good ones out there, but you've got a trade-off, right? You can, just as an example, split tunneling, right, on a VPN, which means does every connection that a user make come through my corporate network, like regardless of what it's doing, or does only corporate traffic come in across the VPN and then everything else goes directly out to the internet? Well, sneak behind the scenes here, as you and I were starting this conference, we had some technical issues, right? And there were bandwidth issues and stuff like that getting started. Well, if you turn off split tunneling, that means everything that all of your home users do, whether they're watching a 4K movie on Netflix or whatever it is they're doing from their laptop, that's all going to come through your corporate gateway, right? And that's a huge, I mean, I don't know about you, but like my network connection at home is the same speed as our corporate gateway at the office, right?
Right.
And so like, I can chew up a lot of bandwidth, and so so now, maybe you're used to having, let's just say 10 remote users. Now you got 200 and they've all got real, Google Fiber or whatever at the house. And so that can be a huge bandwidth demand on your central gateway, even though it's in some ways more secure because you can do that security processing, or you can turn on split tunneling, which means that you lose insight into, at least from a gateway perspective, into what all those people are doing, and you lose the ability maybe to filter some of their connections, do URL filtering or malware scanning or whatever. And so when you combine that with the fact that, bad guys know, oh, now all these people are working from home, and so if I do IoT based attacks, let's say, I've got a better chance of being able to hop through and onto someone's corporate network. They've got more motivation. They're more likely to get a payoff, right? Because what they're trying to do is get into your corporate. And so we've definitely seen a lot of that. And that's another place where we can help people test, is we can actually say, okay, from a remote user laptop, can a kill chain sort of execute? If a user goes to a phishing site, gets malware on their system, can it spread into your corporate network? That's one thing that they let you, that we can let you do. And certainly on the monitoring side, because that VPN concentrator may be very overloaded, there's that's a really good reason that you may want to do security processing, intrusion detection and things like that in separate devices, right? And so that's somewhere where on the visibility and monitoring side, we can help you to, load balance across multiple visibility and inspection tools and things like that, right? And so this has certainly changed the kind of security and IT operations and security operations landscape, absolutely. And those are just some of the examples.
Yeah, so you hit it on the head. I mean, you mentioned a number of new attack vectors and threat signatures in terms of some of the phishing scams, and then you got into a little bit about how they're able to test it. Are you seeing organizations change the way they test and monitor based on some of these new nuances happening?
So on the testing side specifically, I will tell you that, let's see, where are we now? July. 6 months ago, I don't think I had ever had a specific conversation with, an enterprise customer certainly about security testing for remote users, right? I mean, now there were a few cases, like very large customers, where, they would engage us to do remote access performance testing and stuff like in a lab. But like I said, 6 months ago, I don't think we had ever talked to anyone about testing an actual deployed VPN concentrator, that they have on site. It had just never come up, right? I mean, it was just, oh yeah, we're like, it's fine. We turned it on, it's fine. We're not worried about it. And those thoughts of, well, if a remote user gets something on their laptop, WannaCry, whatever it is, can that then spread? Whatever. Like, can that spread into my network? And those conversations just didn't come up that much, right? And so I think it has certainly elevated, that the awareness of the importance of, well, you don't know until you test, and this is a really important question, so maybe we need to know, right? And then your ability to, like, the places that you now need to monitor are very different, right? And so you may really, want to pay attention to, for example, you may have only been really monitoring things at your sort of internet gateway, and not so paying so much attention to traffic coming in from remote users, right? And especially if those were coming in two different places, right? You like we in our company, at my side, we've now deployed a separate, firewall and VPN gateway just for kind of scalability. And so maybe you weren't really paying attention to that remote user traffic, but now it may be really important, because if you get something spreading, something bad happening, you want to be able to go back and figure out, identify very quickly, this looks suspicious, or I need to cut off this user, or I need to tell them to take some action or something like that, and be able to reproduce, or understand what's happening sort of in real time. And so the places that you need to pay, not much is going on the inside of the network now, but that remote user stuff that suddenly becomes very important.
No, that's a great point. It's funny you mentioned that. Data exfiltration is now much harder because there is so much more going in and out,
Right.
and knowing
And
what
from
what
different
was.
places, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Keysight's in a unique position to provide value on both the security and the performance side of customers' network, as well as on the monitoring piece. What are you seeing in terms of some best practices that your customers are looking to implement or leveraging?
Right. So, and honestly, this has, I'd say, the sort of order of operations has been reversed in many cases from what's optimal, because typically you say, okay, next year we're going to have we've got a project to do this, and so we're going to test well, we're going to do maybe vendor selection and that kind of stuff first, which you would normally consider a best practice. In this pandemic, that's not happening, right?
Hmm.
So I think that, so there's been a lot of sort of catch up where
Hmm.
the planning phase, and like people are like, certainly, I mean, we talk to lots of customers who suddenly were running into remote access problems, bandwidth
Hmm.
problems, and things
Hmm.
like that. But establishing a plan to test, understand, and then sort of remediate, whether it's a security issue or a bandwidth issue or whatever, and have very specific, think about, okay, how am I going to do this, and how am I going to do this in production, right? That's, I guess, one of the changes that we're seeing now is, whereas typically you would do a lot of pre-deployment testing kind of in a lab, that may just not be possible now, in part because of the speed at which you've had to respond,
Hmm.
and also because there's nobody in your lab, right? I
Right.
mean, there really isn't. I mean, you can't. It's just much harder to go in and hook up cables, right? And so now there's a real need to test and measure and monitor things in a production setting while they're handling live traffic. And so that fundamentally changes the way that you sort of think about testing. And so whether it's change windows, or like for security testing, understanding ways to do like testing security efficacy, and figuring out where your gaps are in a production network while
Right.
it's handling live traffic, which is a very different thing than process than like lab testing. You know, establishing a plan and executing against that, and then being able to rapidly kind of address any kind of gaps that you identify, changes that you need to make in as unintrusive manner as possible, because you can no longer, like, what was a best practice a year ago just isn't now, because
Yeah.
it's simply not relevant. So I think that's certainly been one of the big changes, and on our side, that's one of the things that we're now supporting. We had traditionally been like, focused on lab testing, right? I mean, that was a lot of our stuff. And now, like with the VPN testing example that I gave, I mean, so now we have a service where we can say, sure, this point us at your deployed VPN gateway. We can tell you how many users it can support, what the performance is, all that, before your users call up and complain. We've got a new breach and attack simulation tool, Threat Simulator, that's designed to do security assessment of your deployed, security stack, and say, oh, you were able to stop this attack, but these two got through, and here's how you go fix those, right? And so that's a big change, right? Because now you don't have that lab environment, you don't have the easy access, so now you've got to make all these understand how things are working, and then address changes in a production environment. So that's been a big change in the way that people think about sort of doing these things, and a big change in what the best practice is.
Well, and you bring up a great point there. I mean, your capability to provide that threat simulation. How is that helping customers in both the tool readiness or the infrastructure readiness, as well as the people readiness?
Oh yeah, so I guess we have been talking about the sort of the technology and product side a lot,
Right.
but there's three P's, right? There's product, people, and process.
Right.
And one of the things that I think we found very much across the industry, there's certainly a shortage of like skilled IT security people, right? I mean, this is no secret.
Yeah.
And going beyond that, most even like good security people often only see and sort of recognize an attack, like looking at their SIM or something, when it's in the rearview mirror, right? When you're going back and doing forensics and saying, oh, that's what that was, right? And if you can do realistic simulations, attack simulation on your production network with your production setup as configured. So not what's ideal, best case kind of in a lab, but with the security policy that I have in place today, do I have gaps? Do I have exposure? Do I have vulnerability? And seeing, okay, if I get hit by XYZ attack, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
That's a big deal, because that, if your people understand and you can set up the processes to say, okay, if I see this and this and this, then I want to, like for setting up rules in your SIM, when do you trigger an alert, right? That's traditionally been a very hard thing to test, right? But if you can realistically like recreate an attack in your network, like make it happen, but safely, then you can test, okay, is my SIM alerting working? Do my people know how to do this? This even happened like in our network. When we started beta testing, like our new test simulator product, going back to the WannaCry example, we were doing it. That was just one of the early, kind of tests that we did. And that spreads via SMB v1, right? And so you'll have a host and we'll do SMB v1 scans and fun. And literally one of our security guys saw like the logs on the firewall and went, huh, I've seen that before.
Right.
And went and looked, and sure enough, there was a lab system somewhere that that was infected. Now it fortunately, like, it hadn't spread anything, but it was trying to do these SMBV1 scans.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, it was an isolated network, and so nothing was getting through. But we had been seeing those V1 scans on that firewall, and so I said, oh, we need to go check that out. And sure enough, we had an actual like WannaCry or Eternal Blue infected like host there on that segment. So that's a good example of where like seeing what an attack looks like can really help your people to understand, this is what I need to be looking for, and then set up the processes, whether it's sim programming or automation or whatever around that, so that when something happens for real, they're ready for it.
Right. Well, and what's interesting too is, we've been talking a lot about, the traditional kind of enterprise corporate networks. What are your insights, or what are you seeing as it relates to wireless deployments and technology? Specifically, obviously, a lot of the carriers are moving to 5G networks and more advanced levels of Wi-Fi, right? Beyond AC, right? So what are you seeing on that side, both on the security side and the performance side?
Yeah, so, well, especially on the 5G area is of particular interest for us. I mean, Keysight, we do a lot on the radio side, certainly for Wi-Fi. We have a lot going on there, although a lot of the security testing has been either kind of layer one or application layer. But 5G is really, really interesting to us. We've joined the NCCOE. We're doing a lot of work, even at the kind of federal level, because there's a big push for, basically the government to get involved in establishing security standards for 5G networks, both for testing, for deployment, for operations, and that's a particular interest to us. And Keysight's in a really unique spot there, because we do everything from layer one, like from the RAN testing, handset emulation and cell tower testing and scalability and everything else on the radio side, up through application layer, right? And so, like, I'll give you an example, something that my team is spending a lot of time on. One of the kind of great promises of 5G is better, kind of more scalable support for industrial IoT, devices, right? With factory floor automation, critical infrastructure, and things like that, right? And I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of like network slicing, right? Where you can allocate like a certain sort of chunk of the network that should be isolated, right? Should. I mean, And so you can have different slices with different security requirements and latency and throughput requirements and things like that. But if you're going to, but remember, this is all virtual. It's not like you have a dedicated piece of, hardware kit that supports this slice and then one for this slice. And so this is all virtual, right? So this is all VNF. So you have to be able to test that, right? Everything from like kind of security leakage for sort of crosstalk, like can data get from one slice to another in an inappropriate way, right? That's a really interesting kind of opportunity for testing, for setting standards, for establishing like ways to monitor. Like, how do you do that monitor? Again, when everything's virtualized, how do you do that monitoring in a pure VNF scenario and monitor and understand the difference between like these slices, and how do you pay attention to those? There's a really interesting opportunity in 5G standalone network testing, the 5G SA stand, and the standards for that are still evolving. But what it basically means is that you can set up a 5G network sort of the way that we set up Wi-Fi networks today that may be connected to the internet. So you'll be able to set up your own 5G network. It could be in a building or on a factory floor, or it could be for traffic management systems in a city, something like that. And so that may be operated by a different entity than what we traditionally think of as a service provider. But that standalone 5G network is still going to be connected to kind of the greater 5G world, right? And use the same, may use the same radio spectrum, right? It may, well, there's some are millimeter waves, so there's some different, spectrums in play, but it's going to be interconnected. So there's a lot of thought about the gateway devices, and how do you build those in a secure fashion? How do you test those? How do you manage those? And it becomes one of the reasons that's really important. If you think about things like autonomous vehicles, right? And collision avoidance systems, things like that, right? So a lot of that is going to rely on processing that's not just in the devices, but you'll have like some things that look, oh, this car is coming this way, this car, so I need to send these two guys an alert, and like this guy needs to stop, right? That won't just be in the cars, that will be, but you don't want to backhaul all of that stuff to the cloud, right? So we're expecting to see the emergence of more sort of localized application-specific processing. For things like that, right? So you're not going, all the way across the country or whatever to some cloud. You're going to have some of that processing is going to be local, just because it needs to be very low latency. But that means if you're doing monitoring for that application, if you're doing testing, you really have to understand the specific protocols that are they're in use, right? To make sure that what you're monitoring, it's not just are the bits flowing, but that particular OT protocol, can I understand it? Can I look for things going wrong? Because if a bad guy wanted to immobilize a city, they could convince that processing system that, oh, all these cars are going to crash into each other, so send a message out to all these cars that tells them all to stop, for instance, right? You can stop the city. And so that requires a lot of that requires very broad spectrum, pardon the pun, understanding of how to both test and monitor, because it's not enough just to do the radio level, right? You've got to have radio all the way up through very, very specific, like application specific testing and monitoring. And so I can't think of anyone else certainly who has that range of, kind of test and monitor capability, layer 1 through 7.
Yeah. No, it's a huge differentiator. So Scott, what's one thing you'd recommend to our listeners to look out for or really think about over the next 6 to 18 months in terms of technology shift, adoption, security? If you're to say that I'm that forecaster, what's that one thing that everybody should be paying attention to?
Well, like it's not, see if there's one. So I think that, this isn't anything radical, but especially given the reality that I think we're going to be remote, right? And probably for a while, and who knows, how much of this is kind of permanent, automation is going to be really important. But automation doesn't take, and because automation doesn't take the place of people, right? Automation is there to help people, because ultimately, whether you're in performance management, security, whatever, most of the decisions, most of the kind of the programming, the allocation of resource, whatever, is going to be made by people. People need better decision support tools. You need better tools to rapidly spot an attack, right? You need tools to rapidly understand, oh, something's going wrong. This person's having terrible performance with their voice over IP. This person has, an inordinate amount of traffic that's coming into the VPN, or like, you want to be able to rapidly spot those things. So you really need, like, this is the ideal application now for like machine learning, right? Is culling through, lots and lots and lots of data and extracting what's important and getting that in front of a user. So the only way that, I think it's really feasible to think about kind of scaling up our operational capacity is through improved automation, but don't ever expect, that automation to kind of do everything for you. Right. Its role is really to get important information to people so that they can make the decisions without being sort of flooded by noise. So understanding, SOAR, like, what are you doing about SOAR? What are you doing about like orchestration? Right. How do you close the loop on, we found something, we think we fixed it, how do we test to make sure it's really fixed, and how do we look for anything?
Tremendous insight, Scott. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise in how to better test and secure networks. We'd ask our listeners to tune in next time for another edition of the Endace Packet Forensic Files. For more information about Endace's network packet capture platform and our integrations with our fusion technology partners such as Keysight, please go to endace.com. Scott, thanks again for joining. Thanks for taking some time.
My pleasure. All right. Thanks, Mike. Talk to you soon.